Welcome to BeMoreNews.com, and I'm your host, Marsha, sitting in for Donnie Glover. We are so excited today. We have Kyle Robinson, who is an empowerment specialist for incarcerated individuals. Moved by his own incarceration experience, Kyle is the creator of Amplified Silence, a project designed to rehumanize incarcerated individuals. And so when we sit here and we look at this, is a beacon of hope in the justice system, serving as an empowerment specialist for incarcerated individuals. His journey and motivation stem from a profound personal experience that many would prefer to forget: his own incarceration. This challenging chapter in his life, however, did not diminish Kyle's spirit. Instead, it inspired him to make a difference for others in similar situations. Out of this inspiration, Kyle birthed a transformative project called Amplified Silence. The objective of this project is to rehumanize those who have been dehumanized by the penal system. It aims to remind society that behind the bars and the orange jumpsuits are real human beings with dreams, aspirations, and the potential for change. By giving voice to the voiceless, Amplified Silence challenges and reshapes the narrative surrounding incarcerated individuals. Kyle Robinson is also establishing About Time Toastmasters, the first virtual Toastmasters club specifically chartered to uplift and refine the communication and leadership skills of the formerly incarcerated. Currently, the club is actively seeking dedicated individuals to serve as club officers, further expanding its potential to affect change. It's my honor to introduce you to Kyle Robinson. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Miss Marsha Jews. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for being patient. I still will figure out the backdrop, but we just keep it moving, right?
That's what we do. We work with what we got, and we're back. It looks
And
like
here
we're
we
back.
are. We're going to keep it moving. So let's talk about how you got to a place where you wanted to empower others. What occurred in your life?
It was probably about 2 years ago. Not probably. It was definitely 2 years ago. I was I had just moved to New York. Actually, it was during COVID, and it was already a season of change for me. In this season of change, a lot happened. A lot that I can't really account for. When I say a lot, what I'm dancing around is people stepping in to make a difference in my life in a meaningful way. I had been traumatized, to put it lightly, by my prison experience, and the post incarceration phase of my life never really uh, balanced out in a way that would allow me to grow and go forward until about 2 years ago. So, as that assistance and help and support and tutoring and mentorship all came in, it it inspires me to want to offer that, and to whatever extent I can multiply it to those who are the least fortunate and generally the most oppressed in our society. And because I have that personal connection, it just plugs right in with the motive.
So, one of the things I think is really interesting is that, far too many our incarcerated people look like us. And when we sit down and we look at all of the trials and tribulations that folks have gone through to even be in this place, the impact is not just the impact for the lives of those who have been prisoners, but also the lives of their families and friends, right? What is it that from an earlier standpoint and looking at the numbers of Black people in the penal system is outrageously high? What are some of the preventive measures that we should be going through in order to assist our young people in making these life decisions?
I think that's a very comprehensive answer, or it takes a very comprehensive solution. I would say, at the very least, let's stop doing what we know doesn't work. Okay? Let's stop incarcerating the people for no reason. Drug possession, nonviolent offenses, criminalizing homelessness. So you're touching so many families that I, in such an oppressive way, that I really can't put the onus, or put the responsibility anywhere first but to our criminal justice system, if you're willing to call it that. I'm trying to get out of that habit. But there has to be some what's the word? Some type of reparational measure, for one. This has been going on since slavery. People often don't remember that slavery was our original criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never not been the case that while we've been free, as if we have, while we've been free, we've never not had a quarter of our population locked up. That's ridiculous. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think you have to start with a change in policing, a change in law, and change in what we call justice. A lot of people bring different ideas to that word. But I think as a community, we have to come together and figure out what that's going to mean for us. We know what it doesn't look like, and that's what we're looking at today. Inhumane conditions, abuse by guards. Just, there's not a thing that was happening on a plantation that is not happening in this moment in a prison inside of, the U.S. So, as you can see, I'm a bit passionate about it this morning.
Well, Kyle, I want you to know that I'm passionate about this as well. I have a nephew who is in the penal system in the Midwest. And making dumb decisions based on what you think your peers want you to see and to do. And he's been locked up for at least 10 years now. We have our regular conversations. He calls, we have the little letters, we do all those things. And I love this young man. I love him. But he made bad choices. He made bad decisions, thinking he understood what that meant. So this conversation is really personal to me and my family. For a child who was so brilliant to do the dumbest of things that has cost him his freedom. Right?
I'm sorry to hear that for you and for the family. On the bright side, I'm sure that he's not the same person who he was when he went in. I wish we had a justice system that would reflect that growth, that change of course, and allow people to come and demonstrate it. So,
well, the hope here is as we sit here and have this conversation, this is an opportunity for us to start having a real dialogue about the color of the people and the numbers of the color of people who are behind those bars. The numbers are outrageous and it's really catastrophic. And nobody wants to really take on this, such as yourself, working in programs that can help change the trajectory of their lives. But we also need to deal with the system itself, the system, the judicial system, and how they give out these long, crazy, outrageously ignorant sentences where people's lives are being impacted forever. Children are being impacted because their families are not together. What is the answer? How do we change that from a legislative, from an incarceration dealing, not legislation, from the judicial system, from the police? All there's like a whole trickle down of what needs to be done to change this, because the majority of those people look like you and me.
Yes, and jurisdictions have a way of sort of hiding behind themselves, but the behavior is very uniform, and the effects are very uniform, especially in the South, where I come from, Tennessee. I I'll say in honesty, I don't think starting at any one place will be effective. I think where we are today is a result of years and years of people making what progress they could in certain areas. And that's one of the things that makes it difficult to discuss prison, is that there's so many overlapping issues that I think we have to get people's mindset, people's concept of justice reoriented towards something that looks more sensible. Also, we have to, or I found that I have to try to address it on a individual level. I've got friends who address it on a legislative level, and some who do it at the organizational level. All of them are making valuable and significant contributions to doing things like getting second look bills passed, or other restorations such as Good Time in Michigan, which is on the table. People are advocating often for their interest or for their loved one. But there are so many unspeakable offenses at the hands of the justice system, the legal system, I'm sorry, that we couldn't even brainstorm them here if we wanted to get through half of them. We could talk about overcrowding for an hour. We could talk about the lack of clean drinking water for an hour. We could talk about the abuses by guards. We could talk about the solitary confinement. We can talk about the children going to prison getting life without parole before they're even 18. I mean, we couldn't exhaust this list. So I think that one of the important places to start is, as advocates, as people who are speaking up about this issue, we make sure that we are equipped to be advocates, to speak as advocates. I ask myself sometimes, if I was on the inside of a prison and I'm looking out, right, watching Kyle advocate for Kyle, would I be proud? Would I be afraid? Would I be, how would I feel? So I think that the biggest thing that I bring to my experience today is having, because of the trauma of being in prison at that age, really lost the ability to speak, to assert myself, to stand up and present and say what I know to be true, to say what I've seen on the inside of those walls. That's a huge reason that I'm chartering about Time Toastmasters. I'll tell you more about it at whatever point that it's time to. I kind of ran with your question.
No, I think that it's on point. One of the things I think and I was thinking about this a couple of weeks ago, like what really occurs in the judicial system as it relates to Black and brown people versus white people, who those numbers, and I don't know those numbers of incarceration, that the numbers of people with melanin versus none in terms of incarceration, long sentences versus short sentences. Can you speak to that?
I cannot make it make sense. I think it's easy to see what it is. There are cases of I know a few women who are serving life or effectively life without parole inside of Michigan. One innocent, one defending her own life and the life of her child. I know of a woman, I'm familiar with the story of a woman who chased or hunted down her husband, shot him, and got 16 years. The disproportionate sentencing is overwhelmingly runs in one direction. There are exceptions, though. I know of a guy named Jamie Mead who's got, he's actually, I think he's one of the first prisoners in the state of Michigan to get his master's or his bachelor's or his master's in a certain program. But he's, in the Chicago Theological Seminary, which is a huge deal. But he's serving a life without parole sentence because of the technicalities of felony murder laws, whereas the gunman served 12 years, took a plea, served 12 years, and has been out for 18 years. You know, so the color of justice is green, obviously, and the victims tend to be brown, put simply.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think all the studies or statistics will bear that out.
So in looking at my family member is from Indiana. And so we already know that Indiana has some real issues. So similar, not far from Tennessee. So, we understand what we're really dealing with. And it's not for the it's not for those who aren't ready for that long haul. But the bigger issue, when I sit down and I look at the national landscape and we see all of our people who look like us, they're part of a fraternity or sorority, and they're doing all these social kinds of things. But we need our community to really start looking at the millions of Black people and brown people who are being outrageously incarcerated, from the judge to the prosecutors to the
Absolutely.
community and the legislators. There has to be a change. How do we impact this? What is it that you all are doing that we can support you?
One of the ways that you can support, there's so many ways I want to answer that question.
Well,
One of the,
you have a half an hour to talk about it, so go ahead.
All right. So one of the most important things you can do for me is to help. Just a simple click. Go to Facebook, search for MissCarrying Justice League. I'm about to tell you about it, but MissCarrying Justice League. And there's a play on words right there. It's MISS, capital C, ARRYING, MissCarrying Justice League. So it was started a little over a month ago by Tamerra Washington, and I'm kind of the point man for it. I help her on the outside. So one of the ways that I'm able to empower her is to get on the computer and do social media. I'm not brilliant. There's not a whole lot that I can do, but a simple step like that has provided an outlet so that all of the women there in collaboration with Tamerra, who choose to, of course, can blog daily. And there is a daily blog. If you check it out, you'll see the feed. It updates every couple hours with more stories. These are writings of people's experiences. These are, for some people, the only outlet that they feel safe reaching out, saying, hey, these guards are letting this happen. I can't, go up the chain of command about it. It's not going to do me any good. I can't go in there and open the doors myself, but I can ensure that society has a connection, an outlet is connected, so that for those of us who are interested and those in there who still have hope and are still fighting, may our voices be amplified.
Mhm. They must be amplified. We cannot continue to let people languish. And the other thing is that there are young people who are being impacted who are the children of those who are incarcerated, right? And the impact and the visual of what those families are going through and those young people in just trying to have relationships with those incarcerated parents and relatives, right? I don't know, but I when I got the paragraph to read yesterday when Donnie sent it, it brought a lot of pain because of what we're going through with Jason, right? And so when I think about him and this little country girl from Indiana, what do we really need to be doing? What do we really need to be doing that's going to be comprehensive, that we can find something where when people are running for election, you've got all kinds of folks on that bandwagon. When we sit down and we look at our elementary schools and our middle schools, we have a deplorable educational system in Baltimore. Deplorable. And so from looking at that, if you don't if you can't even read because you don't have the tools, in Baltimore, we have a woman who makes almost $400,000 a year as the superintendent of schools, but our Black children are getting zeros on their test scores. So now what you've set up for failure is you've not prepared this child from an educational standpoint to be able to do what needs to be done, which is crazy to me. How do we get there from here? What is it that we need to be doing here to change the lives of these children at an early age? You can't wait until they get into prison. Now's the time to be able to sit down and to help them develop the strategy to be the best that they can be.
I think that's the great place to start, the right place to start. Show them now, encourage them now to be the best they can be. There is nothing sadder or more heartbreaking than, meeting someone who's incarcerated and they've never learned how to read or write, and they've been there for 30 years.
Right.
So it is a pattern that we have to obviously break. I think that the challenge, the overwhelming challenge, is that no matter how well intentioned our children are, they are automatically going to be at higher risk to be apprehended, harassed, engaged by law enforcement. So this is coming from someone who does not have children that I know of. I think you have to make it simple for society in your messaging. What do I mean by that? So this it's very difficult to, as we said earlier, approach any one aspect. And I think that prison conditions are so bad in themselves that most people begin to shut their mind off when they hear the phrase. But I think there's 3 points to the reason that people don't want to wake up and pay attention, or don't pay attention. I think a lot more people know what's going on than what is said. But those things, those 3 reflections of our society are: A, there's a lot of dangerous people inside of prisons, and a lot of them are not inmates. Two, there's a lot of innocent people in prison. I know of quite a few. And three, there's a lot of people who don't even fit those two categories, and we just haven't figured out what to do with them yet. All of that speaks to how willing we are as a society to ignore this problem. We've done it for centuries. So I envision us as an activist community becoming empowered to be the effective leaders who are going to drive this type of change, because we're done waiting on it. We're done waiting on the masses. We need high impact people to do it. And that's often people with the personal experience, the stories who've been in there. It's just a shame that a lot of us who've been there don't get to come back out. But for those who have, and I know quite a few of these as well, it is imperative that we understand that we cross-pollinate our efforts wherever possible. You know, there's, regardless of what your issue is about prison, whether it's wrongful conviction, solitary confinement, no toilet paper, whatever, regardless of what your issue is, it is a crisis of this sort that requires that everyone with any capacity or willingness to get involved begin to do so today at whatever level is comfortable for you. That means if you know a person who's incarcerated, maybe you can start there. Maybe you can offer help to that one person as you become familiar with your jurisdiction's requirements for accessing prisoners and whatnot. You also, well, I feel like I answered the question. I'm sorry.
No, and you're welcome to continue. But let me just also say that what we haven't dealt with is the fact that many of these prisons are institutions that are for profit. And they're for profit with the idea that people who look like us are there on a per dollar basis, and they're making a fortune on incarcerating Black people, Black and brown people. That's how they live. They're multimillionaires running these penal systems. And we want to pretend like it doesn't exist, but it's real. And y'all making stupid money on the backs of these brothers and sisters in these prisons.
Miss Jews, they got it so cold. They got it so on lock now. They are leasing out, renting spaces, bed spaces in other states. We'll keep a overstock or a reservoir of Black bodies to come fill those prisons while y'all keep building them. I don't want my brain to pop, but if I think about us as a community accepting the concept of private prisons, for-profit private prisons, I don't really know from what other basis to make sense to people. If I have to word that emergency, if I have to, go into detail about it, let me try. When you incentivize something, what you're doing is fertilizing the soil for it to rehab and to reproduce. Now, in prison, what you have is the worst concentration of human suffering that's going on at any time in the country right now. It's obvious. It's visible. It's touched too many of us. So, I'm sorry. Just to be honest with you, I just lost my place in the question right there. Can you please remind me of?
No, what we're talking about are these prisons that are for profit. And everybody, you can look at them and you see them on the stock market. They're making stupid money based on how many Black people and brown people they can keep inventory in those prisons. And they're building prisons and they're spending billions of dollars warehousing our people. And people don't want to deal with that. But if you have something like in Baltimore where our children are getting zeros on their math scores, and they're getting zeros on the math scores and getting zeros in the English and everything else, that means that they're not prepared to go and do anything the way they're supposed to be doing it, like the folks down the street and in the different zip code. And those zip codes are outlined and they're redlined for those people to be removed from this community, from any community, and warehoused in a prison system for with sentences that are so outrageously long for penny petty reasons. And it's outrageous. And our legislative body, all the Congressional Black Caucus, the national organizations of Black county officials, the governors, the senators, the legislative, all of them need to be, they're culpable if they don't change these laws. And yes,
Absolutely.
I said it.
And they're unwilling to be, for a bunch of reasons. Just you could call out evil, obviously, or just greedy, but
all of the above.
It is this what people can't understand if they haven't been there is that the impact, it's not like we're putting people in a neutral environment where they can rehabilitate. Forget rehabilitation. That doesn't happen. We are overcrowding oftentimes people who oftentimes have mental health issues that should have them isolated or getting treatment. We put them all together with the killers and the rapists. And what we produce, the trauma that we produce, the impact on the person who is going to get out one day. 90% of people who are locked up are going to get out eventually. We are traumatizing people. We're not treating them. We're harming them. To put it short, we are inflicting harm on them, objective, measurable harm. And I think the moment that it's called out, then an avalanche has to happen, because there's too many people who have been. I'm going to tell you about a close friend of mine, Scott. Scott went to prison when he was 17 years old for a rape, being part of a gang rape. He's been in there for 34 years. It appears he's going to finally get justice here in about 3 weeks. I'll come back to that. 34 years of saying it's not me. I didn't do this. And I can go down this people who got out. Scott is still in. This is an example. Scott has had DNA evidence demonstrating his innocence for 2 years. Once thought to be lost, but then found DNA evidence proving that he wasn't the person responsible for this crime. Why does it take 3 weeks? Why should it still be three? Why is he not out tonight? Like, it's the justice system is so rigid, and oftentimes judges, to speak to these excessive sentences that you brought up earlier, oftentimes judges, like the one in Scott's case, have an incentive to close cases more so than to get justice. So Scott, for this crime that he did not commit, was sentenced to 80 to 150 years. A juvenile, innocent. He was put in a type of situation that you don't come back out. Now, Scott's a special case. I trust Scott. Scott has had a loving, supporting wife and kids who've walked with him throughout this trial, this hell of a trial, but you can't get up in 34 years back. So I think we have to proactively begin to demand not just what you're going to do as a politician, when next, if you get this, if you get this vote, get on it today. What are you doing today? Do you have a list of potentially innocent people in your jurisdiction, in your institution? Like, I think we have not gotten the ball rolling yet, and we need everybody's brainstorming on this. But we first have to get everybody's interest, everybody's participation, and make them aware, because it's easy to dismiss those problems until it's your kid, your nephew,
right.
And nobody should have to find out that way.
Right. And
That
go ahead.
nobody should have to find out that way what we do to other people's children under the guise of corrections.
Mm-hmm. And it's a painful existence, for real. Periodically we have the little mail thing where we get to see him and talk, right? And you got to send the prison money to do that, right? And then we send the letters, and we make sure that he has enough to deal with what he needs to deal with his family and his children, right? Because he's no longer in the home. And why he's there is a whole nother conversation, because all of these other people were involved in what was going on, and he just came in at the back end because he was out here with us. So he wasn't even there. Don't get me started. That's just one isolated existence where you can go to war, Miss Agnes, but this is an institution that doesn't care about family, color. Well, they care about color because they know that the majority of the people that are in there are the black and brown people that they can make that money off of per day.
And labor.
Right.
And labor.
Right. Free labor.
Free labor. This is the evolution of slavery. I think when we get far enough in the future to look back at slavery as history, then we'll recognize this mass incarceration to just be the evolution of it in our day. The wages, cents on the hour, 17 cents an hour, doing hazardous duty stuff. And if you don't do it, you go into solitary confinement, what is now recognized across the board as torture. Oftentimes the name is reworked so that it can be fed to society again with no changes. But it is a trap. It is a situation so bad. I interviewed a guy a couple days ago named Isaac. This brother spent 3.5 years in prison waiting to go to trial because of his medical condition. He had to be held at a prison. It was in one of these, I'm not going to say what state it is. It was in the South. Yeah, it was in North Carolina. We'll say what state it is. And for 3.5 years, his story quite simply was as a nonviolent person, he's in a unit full of gang members who terrorize people, especially older people. I don't know why we even keep older people locked up, why we house them together. Crazy. Don't get me started. But Isaac,
right.
Yeah, but so Isaac gets out after 3.5 years. When he won't take a plea, they decide to drop the case because they don't have enough evidence. He gets out with nothing, if no compensation. So this system has enough antidotes by now for us to recognize, for us to connect the dots, and it's time to do that. And I think people are being touched now at a rate where the momentum is here. People are organizing now more than they have before. And here's what a system doesn't correct itself. When you incarcerate people at this high of a rate, the exponential effects through the families, through society, through stability of society, really. It's all pardon me. It's incalculable. It's incalculable.
Mm-hmm. When we sit down and relate like we're doing today, having this discussion, the reality is that we have to, one, create an environment with all these national organizations need to come to the table. We need to deal with the fact that our first and foremost, we must educate our children, period. Just educate them. We've got to educate them. Not like what we're doing here in Baltimore, because we're not educating them if they're getting zeros on their test scores. So we need to replace all
their
these
warehousing.
Warehousing. But what we've done is, if we're not educating them, if children cannot pass their grades, this test scores, if they can't pass their tests, if they can't read, they can't write, they're on a path to prison. That's a prison pipeline, but they're Black people that are running these cities and the educational system, and they're not preparing children who look like us. That's number one. Number two, we have a penal system, the police who are harassing people and arresting people that don't even need to be in prison. Okay, let's start from the jump, because they're just going to get you off the street. And if you go too fast, or if they say that you made a right-hand turn and you really didn't make the right-hand turn, or whatever it is, they're going to sit there because there is an expectation of numbers, that they have quotas that they need to be able to account for. Then you have all of these other judges and everything else who are being paid to make certain that we keep people incarcerated that look like us. And so until we deal with the truth, and stop allowing people to disregard our people, we're going to keep getting the same thing over and over again. What is that? Insanity. And we have allowed these white racists, white supremacists, to run our children out of the homes and into the prisons.
Yes, we have. I couldn't say it any better. I'm not gonna. It's what it is. It's white supremacists who've ran the system for so long. If you're from the, and they might have them all over the country. I know back at home in Tennessee, there's what they call a good old boy system, where these institutions are effectively run by families, or the same groups of families who've for years owned everything in the town. If you go back and look it up, there is such that it's so rooted and accepted. Mm-hmm. It's rooted in our general acceptance that we feel like we can't do anything about it, and that's not an option, and it's not true. Different places, different states, different anecdotes are showing what incarceration can look like as opposed to what it does, and what reentry can look like as opposed to what I know too well it does to anybody.
Right. And it's horrific. And
it's lifelong.
And it stays with you. The reality is also the mental and the emotional experience that these people, once they even come out, are they ready to deal with what the world looks like, if they can even get out? And when they do, and now you have this whole emotional, psychological aspect, is that, are we even treating them properly? Or is there a recidivism,
you got it.
Recidivism that we have to deal with as well. So you come back and you can't function in a normal society. So how do we make certain that you're properly prepared to even come back out into society? which is a whole nother conversation of preparation.
And
So
investigation.
man,
Yeah,
that's a whole nother, right?
yeah. I'm scared to touch that one. I'm scared to
Oh,
touch that
oh,
one.
go ahead, but go ahead, because I see it's
No,
on it's right at the top of your head. Go ahead.
well, we need a system that more accurately reflects the transition, the change, the transformation that people can make while they're in prison. Like, yeah, your nephew, for example. I believe that was your nephew who we were talking about, who 10 years. I don't know what he did,
Nothing,
but if
nothing.
you had
Somebody else did it.
too often the case, too often the case. So if if worst case scenario, assuming he had done it or done something else, he's not the same person that he was 10 years ago. If you'd have, I don't know many people who are the same person that they were 10 years ago.
Right.
If prison does one thing to everybody, it's make you adapt. Whether it's whether you, regardless of how, whether you adapt in ways that are going to lean towards recidivism, or in ways that are going to prepare you for your reentry, depends on factors that are realistically are not there like they used to be, such as mentors, people who might never be getting out, but who could speak to people in there and steer them towards better directions than stuff like drugs or wasting their time, video games all day, whatever. There are there are ways that we can serve people. We can tend to this problem, and I think the best way to do it is to start with what I mentioned earlier, the MissCarrying Justice League. And here's why. The thing that makes it so hard when people get out is that they've been in a place where everything around you physically is designed to show you you don't matter
Mm-hmm. Right.
when you do.
That's right.
So when to make that transition, to begin to become adequate for what it takes, which I'm certainly not an expert in. I'm here by the skin on my teeth, if you will, skin on my back. But we have to prepare people, and we also have to prepare the community. It's a two-part effort. But at the very least, what I learned in my example, my personal example, was that it took some therapeutic self-insight, and I had that modeled by someone who was probably an expert in the field, and really through good luck, just I shouldn't say good luck, through whatever course of actions, generally advocacy, met people who were willing to take the time and kind of turn this key, if you will, in my brain that allowed me to get over the PTSD of incarceration. If the amount of interactions, relationships, job interviews that I probably damaged, just unaware of the psychological impact of the incarceration at such a young age. So I was 16. I was charged as an adult. I don't know if I told you that in the bio, but not everyone gets an opportunity or access to the education, the unique education that it takes to survive that experience and get out here into free society and be productive without a college degree, or even with a college degree once you got a felony. But period, and it's hard for for all of us. There is no greater divider, I think, or predictor of how challenging someone's course of life might be than once you add incarceration to their record. It And we're doing it to kids. I think that Well, I have to get off the boat here because I don't have any. So I can't give the advice on what to tell the kids. But I know our parents, I wouldn't start with the parents. We can tell our officials to stop locking up the parents, which we know increases the likelihood of the child being locked up by 50%. We can tell them, hey, we see this is what we're not okay with. And then in the homes, it's going to take healing. It's going to take time. It's going to take reparation. It's going to take voices like yours and like mine and like, anyone who's watching this broadcast.
I think that's really important because we have to have leadership, right? And with your organization, that leadership could come through you in working with the Congressional Black Caucus and the National Organization of Black County Officials and the governors and the whatever. So there's an association for every level of politics possible, right? And not to mention every level of fraternities and sororities. We have all of these agencies that are coming out of our community that are generally, quote unquote, part of the leadership of communities, right? And they need to be in place to make certain that we get what we need to make certain these children and young people and elders that are still in prison need to have freedom. Because what they're doing, what they've done to millions of people with melanin in their skin, we are basically imploding their families by having their loved ones locked in a prison without the training to actually go to leave. You should be able to go in if you have to be there, get a job training, and then come out and be an active citizen in your community. We're not doing that. Go ahead.
It never profits the system to let you free.
Right. Because it costs you pay, I don't know, $20,000-$50,000 a year per person to be in prison.
Yeah, around 30 on average.
Okay.
And it's what safer bet? You brought up the school to prison pipeline earlier. What safer investment is there when you have this type of collaboration or failure of inactivity by our leadership,
right,
to even speak about this issue? This should be a 24/7 conversation. When I meet Donnie, when I talk to Donnie, that's what I'm going to tell him for. There needs to be somebody talking about this around the clock, because when it's your mother or your son
or your nephew, and that's personal for me. It's personal.
You're doing the time. You do the time with them.
You do, and it's really when we get to have the visual, right? When they have the little thing, the little video, so that we can have live conversations, and we're all sitting on the couch having a conversation between the three of us, trying to talk him, and it's like we have fun. But then I get off, and I'm like, right?
It's the worst thing about visiting is it's almost like, should I even go, and set up that pain? But being there, you have to. You
You don't have.
You have to. And that's the heartbreaking. That's what you can't know. That's what you cannot know until it's you. You don't have that option.
Mm-hmm.
You're forced in by way of this unresponsive, oppressive system to make these long visits to show your love and support. But don't give up. Don't give up. Don't stop. Nope. Because there is no greater gift you can give somebody than a friend or a trustworthy person in the one place where you can't trust anybody.
Right.
So, being that stable source of support, I commend it, and I appreciate you for it. And there's a lot, too many of us identify with this situation. Let's make this a continual conversation, because there are people in every state who are, gaining momentum, pushing this conversation to new levels and louder in different ways and at different audiences than ever before. So let's stay engaged and keep this conversation alive and ongoing. I'm sorry. That's all I had right there.
So, Kyle, thank you. And let's stay in touch and know that you have an advocate here. And
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm
I
glad
didn't
you
mean
did. I'm glad you did. Because it's not this.
It's a
This
sad
is not
conversation.
about. It's not about me. It's about the whole population, and how we, too often we don't have enough people who are willing to have the conversation that you have somebody incarcerated that's part of your family or friends. And the truth is that it's painful and it's unnecessary, because far too many of our young people and old people who have too much melanin in their skin, who are sitting in there and they're not guilty, and they're not guilty, and they're not guilty. And so at some point, this nation needs to deal with this racist environment that we live in, and the impact that they're having on families across this nation.
Incarceration. It is, and I coined it, so give me some leeway.
I love it.
It is the subtle belief, mostly on the part of white people, but by Americans in general, that more incarceration or harsher incarceration deters or steers crime, causes a decrease in crime. It does not. It doesn't. What it does is further trauma, enslave the people. We're not even talking about the many corporations who benefit off the backs of prison labor so that they can sell retail products to us in the stores. But I hope that if you only remember one thing that I said today, go to Facebook and check out or follow the MCJ or the MissCarrying Justice League page. I want to hammer down on that, because I have my own PTSD and I go on a train. I want to hammer down that in the state of Michigan, there's only one women's prison. You have here possibly the biggest collaboration on a project in history within one state, or women's prisons. I don't know. I know that it's hard to get 200 people to agree to anything or to sign up with anything, and people have en masse found this an outlet that they need. It provides something that, for those who are not like your nephew, don't have someone there. We're there, and this is where we go, engage. Let's show our sisters in there who not often, their incarceration is tons worse. They're both bad, but it's tons worse than the men's incarceration. The amount of sexual abuse, the amount of women who are there for self-defense in a country before Me Too, before domestic violence was really a term, the amount of women there just defending their life.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be there for them. Go to Facebook, MissCarrying Justice League, and yeah, engage, comment, come back, and that allows, yeah, let's build this entity. I need your help. MissCarrying Justice League.
Well, this is really powerful. Kyle Robinson, you are the empowerment specialist for incarcerated individuals, and we are just grateful for your time and effort. And you're stuck with me now.
I've been in worse places.
All right. This
I,
is
I
a
look,
Go ahead.
I look forward to your show, your next episode.
All right, sir. Well, listen, we're going to be in touch. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and know that you have a support system over here.
Thank you. That means the world.
You have a support system here. God bless
Uh,
you and your work. And we appreciate all that you're doing
thank,
personally and professionally. Okay.
thank you, sister.
All right, Kyle. Okay. I'm
Have
Marsha
a.
Juice. Go ahead.
Oh, I was Xing out. You got it. I'll let you take us out, Marsha Juice.
Okay. Thank you all for watching. BeMoreNews.com. I'm Marsha Juice, sitting in for Donnie Glover, and hope you enjoyed the show to the point where it's your call to action. And we need to be looking at one another about how are we helping change the trajectory of people who look like us, who are now incarcerated. And you never know who might be next. God bless you all. Thank you.